Mike, hi, this is Luana. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can take control of the slides.
Hey, Luana, this is actually Erica. We share an account, so it
looks like
it looks like Mike. He should be on any minute.
Okay.
I know he likes to control the slides as he walks through them.
Okay, that sounds good. I'll keep it up until you let me know to stop sharing.
Okay.
And thank you for everyone for joining. We'll get started shortly.
Hey, Erica, did you want me to share my screen?
Hey, Mike. Yeah, I think Luana has it up right now. She wanted to switch with you.
Okay.
I'll turn it off.
I'll be happy to.
All right, I think I've stopped sharing my screen. Let me know if you have control. Looks
Yeah,
like you do.
you want to let me know if you see the Chapel Hill Road study.
Yes, I do.
I don't.
You don't. Oh no.
Is that Jack?
Yes,
Hello, sir. So do you have audio and video capability?
yep, audio and video, and I see the starting screen, Chapel Hill Road study. We will be starting shortly.
That is it.
Oh,
That is it.
that's all I'm going to get.
That's all you're supposed to see at this time.
Okay. Okay.
All right, so we are 1 minute after 5:30. So just to be respectful of everyone's time, why don't we go ahead and get started? I just want to thank you all for joining us as we talk about Chapel Hill Road tonight. My name's Luana Deans. I'm the project manager, and tonight we're going to be doing a deeper dive to talk about the number of travel lanes. And I'm going to turn it over to Erica really quick to just do a quick Zoom etiquette for us while we all join. If you're not familiar with Zoom, all the platforms are just a little bit different. So she's going to give us a quick 101.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Just a few little etiquette rules on Zoom so we have the best presentation for everyone here. If you are watching and even have your video on, maybe make sure your mute is on, and you can do that. That'll be in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. And if you are in the participants panel, sort of in the middle of your screen, you can rename yourself if you needed, if you're maybe on a cell phone or something like that. And feel free throughout this meeting to use the chat function that's going to be at the bottom middle of your screen, and I'll monitor that and make sure we stop periodically to go through any questions that come up. And then towards the end of the presentation, we'll have some live polling, and we'll walk you through that. There's just a few questions. And if you think you're having any connectivity issues, It seems to work a little bit better if you turn your video off and just listen in.
Awesome. And Erica, can you, full disclosure, folks, we'd like to videotape this for those that cannot join us. So Erica, can you start the video?
Yes, it's recording.
There you go, Luana.
Great. Thank you, Erica and Mike. So as I said, my name's Luana Deans. I work for the town of Cary. I am the project manager for the Chapel Hill Road Mobility Study. And tonight, we've heard a lot of input from residents over the course of this study, but tonight we really want to focus and even get a little bit more technical with you and dive deeper into the number of travel lanes that we're talking about on Chapel Hill Road in the future. If you joined us for our last meeting, you heard Mayor Weinbrecht talk about Chapel Hill Road's history and how it was part of the Central Highway that connected Cary to Durham. And so that road was paved 100 years ago, almost 100 years ago in 1923. And it makes me think that this study's recommendations could very well be in place 100 years from now. But with anything that's almost a century old, sometimes we need to modernize, sometimes we need to reimagine, what it could be for what our needs are today and for the future. So our agenda tonight, in just a few minutes, I'm going to introduce our project team. Mike, then I'll turn it over to Mike, and he's going to give you a little recap on what you've told us so far throughout the study, what we've heard from you. And, I've really enjoyed hearing all the different perspectives from residents and business owners. So far, we've interacted with over 2,000 people through all our different public engagement activities, whether it's been the online surveys, the public meetings, stakeholder meetings, or just getting emails from residents. And then after that, we're going to get a little bit more technical on you, as I said, and really focus on the number of travel lanes. Do we want 2 lanes? Do we want 4 lanes? What are the pros and cons of both widths? What are the trade-offs? And really give you a comparison of both widths. And we'll follow up with that discussion, like Erica said, with some poll questions and give you some time for some Q&A also, because I'm sure some of you are going to have some questions. And then at the end, we'll talk about next steps. We're looking at a design workshop in the fall, and we'll give you a little bit more detail on that. But right now, I'm going to hand it over to, we have our project team. I just want to introduce them really quick if I can, Mike, on the next slide. So again, I'm working with Juliet Andes at the town of Cary. We're kind of the cohorts working on the Chapel Hill Road study. And then we have Mike and Erica with Stantec leading it up as part of our consultant team. Jackie Turner with Jackie Turner Consulting is helping us lead the public engagement efforts. And then we also have Matt Hayes at Alta, who is our complete streets guru. I like to call you Matt. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Mike.
Awesome. Thank you, Luana. And a nice qualifying statement of bringing up the history. I love that because, it was here for over 100 years, right? Probably started out as a dirt road and with horses and the like. And so its function, you think about it, the function, who it served and what it served, the purpose of it has evolved over time, right? And so should the design features of that corridor. And I think that's really important to understand. So folks, I think we've got an hour and a half, but we're probably going to go much quicker than that, to be honest with you. We're very direct and intentional in our discussion today. So let's jump right into it. We'll start with the schedule. We're a little bit more than halfway, right? The last time we talked to you was back in September, and you recall that was our project symposium. It was more of a visioning exercise. We had some data, inventory, crashes, and volume, and all that stuff. But we also tasked you with answering some critical questions about how you use the corridor, live, work, and play, bicycle, pedestrian, transit, roadway, and everything. So, and that's really good information. We'll highlight a few of that, but we're really at the halfway, a little bit beyond the halfway point. Following this, once we nailed down a preferred cross section or number of lanes, and again, whose decision is that? It's really the city public officials and as well as the management staff that's going to help us move that along. And then we can parlay nicely into that design workshop. That's where we have planners, engineers, landscape architects, and urban designers all under one roof doing that that final design. And then we'll come back to you after we revise these concept designs, we call them, and renderings, and host an open house. And that way you can, hopefully this will be in person. I'm hoping, cross our fingers, Luana, be in person so we can walk through those recommendations, better understand phasing, implications on development, redevelopment, and as well as costs. So let's jump right into it. So our today's goals, real quick and dirty here. We're going to review a little bit what you told us over the course of the study. And again, remember, it's been 8 months since we've been able to collaborate. So it's been a little bit of a time lapse there, but that's okay. And then discuss the number of lanes and help you help us by answering a few questions. A little bit of context for those of you that are new to the project. The corridor study is a little over 2 miles and it goes from Maynard to Maynard. It's that simple. And honestly, I think between there, it changes. It changes in the number of lanes from 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 and back to 2. It's kind of a nondescript as you go through this corridor in terms of land use, because you've got single family, multifamily, you have institutional with schools and churches and banks. But then you also have rental property as well, and people will use it for different reasons. And sometimes it could be a commuter route as well. So we're going to share some of those insight as we walk through the corridor. Some of the key takeaways that you told us, this is kind of a snapshot, if you will, of that, include, and I'll just quickly go through here, inconsistent cross-section, and that's the number of lanes. It changes, and sometimes that adds to confusion. Lack of pedestrian facilities, that's pretty much number one. Lack of pedestrian level lighting, which means we only are able to use this corridor for maybe 8 hours of the day. Utilities leapfrog across the corridor. And then access to downtown. I think that was one of the key themes that came out of how people want to use the corridor moving forward. No bicycle facilities, as you well know. And then the corridor diversity, we mentioned that. Lots of folks using this, including commuters. And I think we took this quote from one of the participants. It's really qualified, and we just kind of kept it. It's that forgotten corridor. Everything else has had public investment, and really Chapel Hill Road has not over many, many decades. Matt, you kind of want to walk through the data and the inventory and the corridor profile for us?
Sure. Yeah, and thanks everybody for joining again. And you know, before we get into the fun part, which I think is what everybody is wanting to be part of, kind of discussion a little bit more about kind of the future of the corridor. Let's kind of break down a little bit of what is the corridor today. What is the context? What are the things that are out there today? You know, we're going to take a look at this kind of west and east. So the west end from Maynard towards Harrison and Academy, and then we'll look at the east end. There's a little bit too much information to digest here, so we're going to go take this one by one. So let's look at the next slide. So, you know, it may be hard to visually see, but what we try to do is show you what it looks like along this entire corridor in a snapshot view. So breaking it down to active transportation facilities, you know, I think it's one of the challenges and one of the things that we've seen and heard from you all. And what's out there physically is there's a gap in the sidewalk network, and you can see those gaps there. You can see the spots where there is sidewalk. You know, but by and large, there are large gaps out there today. There is a street side trail at the very western end on the northern side of Chapel Hill Road. But you know, the gaps in this sidewalk system make it difficult, less permeable, and a little more challenging for walking along the corridor. Obviously, when you don't have a place to do it. And we took a look at crashes, and you know, a fair amount of these are bicycle pedestrian related crashes. Most of them happening right around Harrison and Academy, where some of the intersections and those roadway crossings happen. And I think Erica or Michael mentioned this later, but I think this particular corridor has a higher crash rate for vehicular walking and biking than most 2 lanes around the state. I think maybe even 2 times as high of a crash rate. So that's a challenge. That's something we want to fix. We want it to be a safe roadway corridor as well. So traffic volumes, when we look at actual motor vehicles moving through the corridor, this stays relatively consistent. It ranges from around, I think, 11 to 12,000 all the way to around 16,000 for the roadway corridor. And I know that may not mean a lot to the viewing public, but it means it carries a fair amount of traffic. And a 2-lane road can carry that traffic, but it can sometimes be pressed a little bit with that type of volume, particularly in the rush hour period. this is what's really interesting too, is the right of way. So when we look at what we can do from a, perspective of what's the opportunity for us with this corridor, the right of way is so inconsistent, it changes a lot. So when you're up there near Lowe's, about 100 feet of right of way, but you can just see just in this short corridor of about a mile, the segment on the western end, you've got at least 6 or 7 different right of way widths, and you get pretty narrow, particularly as you get closer to the downtown and to Harrison and Academy.
Yeah, Matt, that add to that too. So right of way is the property that is owned by the state or owned by someone else, not a private interest. And I think that's important to understand here as we look at potential impacts down the road.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that.
And that's the space where we're going to build the road, just to make sure that we're being clear in layman's terms. And so, yeah, the thing that jumps out to me when I see that right of way is just that it's, really narrows down right there about at Harrison and Academy. It's really just kind of a bottleneck when we're talking about the available land there.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, and land use, again, this is also variable too throughout the corridor. And like Mike said, it's hard to kind of get a consistent feel along the corridor. There's obviously more commercial as you're near the Maynard intersection. And you start getting down into some residential, lower, medium residential, some high density residential. There is quite a mix along this entire corridor as well. And each of those users have different needs, right? So, somebody who's just trying to come home, someone who's going to work, someone who's going to do some shopping. You got a little bit of everything here. And in some degree, there might be some people that are making the through movement just to head to Raleigh or head to points west as well. So let's look at the east corridor, and we'll break this down in a similar way to how we did last time. So the eastern side, so really looking at Academy towards the east and Maynard in that direction. As you can see with the active transportation facilities, we probably have even more gaps. There's even more of a lack of sidewalk facilities here. Just a touch of bike lanes that come in at the very eastern end of the corridor. But again, this is an issue for sure. When you've got these kinds of traffic volumes and no sidewalk to walk on, that's something that we really want to try to address in this study if we can. And a lot of the feedback we've heard from the public thus far is all about improving that. Crashes, a lot less crashes on this end. And, I think that, we don't have bicycle and pedestrian count information. I know we have that in some locations around Cary, but that's a more difficult thing to measure. And we don't have it for this particular corridor. It may just be there's more bicycle and pedestrian traffic on the western end. You've got the school, you've got a few more destinations commercial wise at the other end. And then obviously at Academy and Harrison, you have a lot of destinations and getting close to downtown. It may be that there's just not as much activity here, but just something to note that there are less crashes on this end. Traffic volumes, again, in this stretch, were about 12,500 to 16,000. Again, it kind of, gets a little bit higher right around Harrison and Academy, which makes some sense. There's a little bit more traffic movement in that particular area. But again, this is probably one of the few things that stays pretty consistent for the corridor. A range of about 3,000 to 4,000 is not a huge range of traffic volumes. Now here we have actually a lot more right-of-way width. So, if you recall on the western end, a lot of variation, and we get very narrow down to 64 feet, like Luana mentioned. That's not a lot of space. But we open up pretty wide here on the eastern side to about 150 feet for the majority of the corridor. So this is a very different opportunity for us and a different way of looking at that ownership of that roadway envelope, and then outside of the current pavement as well. You get a little more consistency in terms of some of the land uses along the corridor. There's a good bit of office and institutional. As you can see, office and industrial as well. Good amount of industrial use, particularly on the southern side of this road. A bit more commercial and mixed use as you get closer to the downtown, back in the center of this corridor as well. So again, that's something you have to think about when you think about future use in the corridor and what the current needs are right now in terms of transportation along the corridor.
Awesome. Thank you, Matt.
Sure.
And that speaks well towards key destinations, right? Not just the downtown. Everybody that's walking along this corridor may not be going just to downtown, but they may be going to the bank. They may be going to Lowe's. They may be going to the gas station or the hair salon or the barber shop, you name it. And so people are using this corridor for different reasons. good job covering the ADT. I think this is a great perspective because it actually shows the ADT not only along Chapel Hill Road, but along its counterpart, Maynard Road. So 18 to 22,000 up there. And we're going to show a little bit later on how that that comparison looks at in terms of travel time. And Matt
And
did.
ADT, I just want to jump in, Mike. ADT is the annual average daily traffic, so the amount of traffic in a day.
Right.
on the road.
Thanks for clarifying that. Most importantly, though, is the safety aspect, and that crash rate is over 2 times the state average for similar 2-lane roads. So we've really got to be cognizant, and that's got to be almost alarming when you think about it. So we got to fix safety. We fix anything else, we got to fix safety. And here is the travel time. We use the same base map here just to kind of show you from A to B, going from Maynard to Maynard along Chapel Hill Road. When you compare the 2 corridors, and why this is important is because we want to better understand, hey, if we do something different along Chapel Hill Road in terms of laneage, how will that impact adjacent parallel routes? And the one that pops out, obviously, in this case is Maynard. So when you look at Maynard, it's 2.2 miles compared to 2.1 miles of Chapel Hill Road, right? So what does that mean? Maynard's got 4-lane divided. I think in the long distant future, where they're looking at widening that to 6-lane divided. Its posted speed limit is 45 miles an hour. And now compare that to Chapel Hill Road, little less, about the same length, right? 2 lanes for the most part. It's 35 miles an hour, or would become a consistent 35 miles an hour when we're all said and done. And then when you compare the travel times, this is where it gets interesting. Just based on simplistic math, distance and time, travel time for Maynard is a little less than 3 minutes. Travel time along Chapel Hill Road is 3.5 minutes. And whether or not that 30 or 40 seconds is a big deal or not may be interesting, or may be most important to those that are using it as a commuter route to get to Cary, to get to R2P, to get to Morrisville, that sort of thing. All right. We'll stop there. Anything about the data? Any questions that we have from folks about the data? And by all means, it looks like the chat box is going great. So I might highlight a couple of those things. I think, Nick, you brought up about the speed, looking at the actual travel speed, the speed versus the posted speed. So we did get out there. I think we did a floating car method or something like that. Not to bore you with the details, but we did see that speed, especially during off-peak hours, speed above the speed limit, or people that were speeding, were really east of Academy Street towards Maynard. And that makes sense because there's no friction. There's a lower number of driveway curb cuts. There's no signals. And let's face it, everybody who's driven that corridor, even myself, I have a tendency to speed through that corridor. So it was higher than the speed limit that is posted there. And that makes sense. Not a whole lot of friction on the edges to slow down cars. I did think that, the school, here's another example. The school, though, where they hired the crossing guard there, probably one of the most polite persons I've ever met in my life. He was great. He really, without him there, quite honest with you, I think cars would speed even more so along that corridor as well. He's absolutely necessary to get people across there. In fact, he helped a bicyclist cross the road as well. It sounds almost ridiculous when you think about it, but being on 2 feet or 2 wheels is a challenge in this corridor. Nick brings up, I'll bring this up. Kurt says, eastbound traffic does not seem to pay attention to the 35-mile-an-hour sign by the State Employees Credit Union. Okay, on that eastbound. Gotcha. Yep. That makes sense. And honestly, I think it's 5 or 6 lanes out there too, Kurt, right? And you just fly through there. You get through a very busy intersection, waiting 2.5 minutes until that thing turns red or turns green. And people it's a very aggressive intersection. And so great insight from you. Nick writes, Kurt agreed. And lots of folks driving through the red lights at Harrison Academy. That's a little bit scary, but I've actually seen that as well. And a part of that, in my perception as an engineer, is because that is a very tight intersection, and the sight lines are ridiculously tight. And when you get the turn lane there, you're actually facing a through lane coming at you going southbound on Harrison. It's very confusing, and yeah, people just want to get through that intersection at whatever cost. And there's a lot of red light conflict there. Lindsay writes, I agree, Kurt, and I think that is because it wide open appearance. Looks like 45-mile-an-hour road. Yep. That's a previous discussion about the actual corridor itself, not the intersection of Harrison. All right, I'm going to skip some of these. We have this. So Matt, thanks for responding back. Kurt says, Lindsay, I contacted NCDOT and requested a warning sign prior to Northwest Maynard. And all they did was put a yellow post and some bright color on top of the sign. All right. Seemed like the data, Nick writes, seemed like the data posted on the Cary Citizen showed a number of crashes where there were stoplights present versus no stoplight. Any correlation? Agree, Mike. Oh, gotcha. Anybody want to take that on, Luana or Juliet?
Versus, I haven't seen that data. So certainly, stoplights help when you have conflicting traffic, right? A lot of left turns. So it's trying to determine who gets the right of way. So I think in part, it's really going to depend on the situation.
Yeah, and the volume of traffic. I mean, let's face it, Harrison carries a ton of traffic, and then you throw in the Maynards, that's a ton. Academy, not so much, right? But we'll take a look at that, Nick, and see if anything pops out of this. I think that's a good insight. Lanes. All right, Sandy, we got a newcomer here. I'll just do a couple of those, then we'll get back into the discussion. But Sandy Campbell writes, I think we need a warning light for the school, the same on Maynard for walkers off the Greenway. I love it. We'll definitely look at that. You're reading our minds, Sandy, but something needs to happen outside of I hate to say it, but relying on police to control speed or relying on a crossing guard to safely get everybody across the corridor is probably a little unrealistic. And so we've got to redesign the corridor, number one, to slow down speeds. And you can only slow down speeds through redesign. Changing the speed limit will not do it alone. That's number one. Number two, there's some great tools out there to get people safely across the road. I'll pick on the Hawk signal on Maynard. And you think about Maynard carries 20,000 vehicles a day getting to, I think it's Gobbo Park up there with the Hawk signal. It's a little daunting the first couple of times, but then people respect that. It actually acts like a traffic signal, stopping both directions, and then you can safely cross that. Luana?
Yes, and we have taught, pedestrian safety is a high priority that we're hearing from all the residents that they want along Chapel Hill Road. So certainly crossings are part of that. And that's something that we're going to be looking at, whether we do a Hawk signal on Chapel Hill Road or some sort of high visibility crosswalk or pedestrian refuges. So certainly that's going to be incorporated into our conceptual plans. And you'll see more of that when we do the design workshop.
Awesome. Thank you, Luana. Last question, then we'll dive back. We got even more questions on here. This is great insight. And again, we'll memorialize this through our video. Doug Lively writes, light time through the NC 54 Maynard intersection are too short. This is why people are trying to beat that light. And, I agree. And when you have more lanes, right, you think about the number of lanes that are at that intersection. When you have the number of lanes and you exceed 20 lanes, that's 5 in each direction, you start limiting the amount of time for each turning movement. And that's always going to be a continual problem and frustration for people that are behind the wheel.
And we can pass that comment on to our traffic group too,
Yeah.
control the signals. So they're very good.
Yes, they are. All right. So what do we hear? Let's jump into it. We mentioned the symposium. Again, that was that first visioning exercise, similar to what we did here in a virtual context. Here's our wonderful team up here and the people that participated. So let's talk about what we heard. We did some instant polling. Part of that, there's really 4 or 5 things that popped out of my mind. And I'm going to go through them. 90% of the participants said walking and bicycling were the most important to improve in Chapel Hill Road. And that makes sense. The treatments, the amenities are really non-existent along majority of the corridor, especially for bicyclists. 96% said Chapel Hill Road was below or poor average. Whatever that means, the corridor itself, it could be the development, all of that. Biggest safety measure, pedestrian crossings, getting across the street. If getting across the street is your most important problem in your downtown, isn't that going to impact the quality of your downtown? So really got to think about that. That's a basic necessity for an active and vibrant and attractive, safe downtown. Last but not least, quality of development along the corridor, bad or poor, almost 90%. Luana?
Yes, I mean, certainly we want a walkable downtown, so crossings are definitely a priority, and that's what we're hearing from residents. So, you know, it's more than just pedestrians, though. I just want to remind everyone out there, we're also dealing with cyclists. Transit is a consideration, and then of course the motorists who are out there today. So we really want to develop a corridor, a street that can serve all users, right? And that there's a balance there. So certainly that's something that we're looking to do through this study.
Yeah, good point. There will definitely be some trade-offs, but priority, in anybody's downtown, priority has to go to the pedestrian, but we have to compete, or that competing interest is with other modes and other functions. So that's a good point. Our virtual engagement, our online tools, hopefully many of you, and I tell you what, we're going to test your Zoom skills. Use that little dialogue box down there and raise your hand if you have visited the Chapel Hill Road study on the website. And I'm going to test you a little bit on your Zoom skills out there. Outside of that, we also had an online survey. There you go. Thanks, Wayne. Thanks, Nick. And then an interactive map as well, which has been great. And the results are absolutely astounding. You guys have had, I think this is a little outdated, Luana, I think so, but you've had over 1,500 participants on the online survey, the interactive map. So kudos to you guys and really focus in on what's important here and for your interest in this. Let's walk through some of the things that we heard. Number one, 94% of you guys, all of us, the people using that road, 94% are behind the wheel. And that makes sense because there's very little amenities for bicycle pedestrian, but there are people that are using that, around 6%. Congestion still probably more prevalent among the modes in terms of issues with transportation. And then the bicycle and pedestrian safety, that was paramount in terms of how well or how satisfied you are with the corridor treatments. Key takeaways in some of our comments on the online interactive mapping exercise. You'll see that top right-hand corner map. We got a lot of comments, not just centered in Harrison or Maynard or near the school, all along the entire corridor, which is pretty great. So excellent way of looking at the entire corridor holistically. Some of the key takeaways in terms of things that we heard over and over and over again, turning. Yeah, if it wasn't for turning movements, no one would have a problem on our streets. That's why they hire us to do this, right? Sidewalks, road, traffic, bike, walk, car, left, and intersections. So it's kind of a neat way to visualize that, and well over 700 comments that we took.
It was interesting to look at everyone's comments on the map, and that it was really, like you said, evenly distributed, right, throughout the corridor, whether they were talking about the Greenway, the intersections, the Maynard intersections. There were comments everywhere. So it was really interesting to read through.
Awesome.
It's not still open, but certainly if that's something you think we should put out there, again, we could certainly turn it back on.
Honestly, I think we've got enough of feedback. It's been tremendous, honestly. Compared to other communities, you guys have done a fantastic job getting the word out and getting good feedback. So what are our key takeaways from this? And, we could probably have a laundry list of, 25 key takeaways, but what, things that resonate in our mind. The corridor feels unsafe. Not only is the perception is unsafe, the data says it's unsafe, it feels unsafe. I've seen many times of people walking down that median where the road cut off just east of Academy, and then walking down the road in the travel lane just to get from A to B. People want safe way to ride, walk along across the corridor. You got Black Creek Greenway that tiles up to it, and then it dead ends into Chapel Hill Road with no direction and no safe haven to get across the street or no sidewalks. That needs to be fixed, as well as the school and some of the other key locations. The corridor is poorly designed, and that came through loud and clear with some of your comments. Chapel Hill Road is not aesthetically pleasing. That makes sense. And improve connectivity to downtown. People want to get downtown. As your community grows, it's no longer just Academy Street and Chatham Street, our community. I live there too. So it now has expanded, and it should feel safe for everybody.
Yeah, there are a lot of neighborhoods north of Chapel Hill Road, and we just consistently hear from them. They want to be able to walk downtown. And they want to be able to walk to schools too and feel safe. So certainly that's something that we're hearing from the community and that we're taking into account.
Awesome. So going back to our comments, and Luana, if you can take some of these too, that's great.
Yeah, there's you guys are like prolific with your comments. I don't know if I can keep up with them all. But I see one, I think, kind of where we left off from Greg Couch. Hi, Greg. Is there going to be a plan to educate people that if we're encouraging people to use Maynard Road? And yes, certainly, I think if we are trying to get more regional traffic or commuter traffic to use Maynard Road, then certainly we need to improve the intersections, on both sides of them to make it easy to turn on and off of Maynard Road. And then certainly, signage, it is already NC 54. In the 60s, council actually changed the designation from NC 54 from Chapel Hill Road inside the Maynard Road loop to Maynard Road. So they kind of designated it as a bypass when they did that. And certainly NCDOT bought onto that. And that's part of the reason why it was widened to a 4-lane road, and why in our long-term plan, it's slated to be a 6-lane road in the future too, to accommodate that commuter traffic. So certainly, yes, we would need to communicate that. And honestly, I think Waze and Google Maps would probably facilitate that also. Every once in a while, I don't use it every single day, but every once in a while, I check it. And if I see there's a faster way for me to get home, then I change my route. So I think. And
that's important because a lot of folks, and now cars are automatically come with it, Waze or GPS, and it's the travel time. So, and when we look at potentially changing the speed limit, especially in the 45-mile-an-hour zone for walkability, bikeability, transit access, that's going to have an impact on the GPS and the quickest route. That's going to be other. Nick writes, I have the Cary Citizen post with the crash data at intersections, but can't post it on the chat. Thanks, Matt.
You can certainly email that to me, and I can put my email in the chat. It's also on the website.
I think Erica did the same, so that's awesome.
Okay, great. Thank you, Erica.
Kurt writes, Greg, it's possible that the changes would cause some traffic to take a faster Maynard bypass, but may need to add another left turn lane. Okay. Juliet, thanks for responding to Curtis. Jay Boobin. All right. First time attendee. Thanks, Jay, for joining us here. Why does the study stop at Maynard Road? I love it. At Lowe's, that side. What about the stretch between Maynard and Cary Parkway? That bottleneck is bad.
It's true. And actually it's on our webpage also. It's not on the study webpage, but there's an associated webpage that shows that NCDOT actually did a study already looking at that segment. And there are plans, they have conceptual plans for that part of the corridor. And so we weren't looking to duplicate work since NCDOT, and I think it was CAMPO, which is our metropolitan planning organization, had already taken a look at that part of NC 54 Chapel Hill Road, and even it goes all the way into Morrisville, all the way up. I think Julia will have to correct me, all the way up to 540.
Yeah,
So
it
they
goes
were-
up to, yep, you're right, Lou. It goes all the way up to 540, and I actually just posted the link to that study in the
You
chat
did.
right after the question. So
There you go.
if
Excellent.
anyone's interested.
Yeah, so
Thank
we
you.
weren't looking to duplicate work essentially, but we do recognize there's a problem. And there is, we are requesting that NCDOT widen that, and certainly they're evaluating that right now as part of their spot process.
Awesome. Thanks, Juliet, for that posting that. And then anybody, if you have issues with the web links that we're putting on here, just let us know, let Erica know, and then we can get that into your hands. So Joe Gov, are there preliminary plans to widen Chapel Hill Road, and will residential property be acquired by the TOC? And so, Town of Cary. So this is the discussion. That's why we're here today, Joe. We are talking about, in either case, we're looking at making some improvements and laneage improvements. Right now, most of it is 2 lanes. So we are looking at adding additional pavement here. And then we'll talk about the number of lanes in a second. So bear with us on that one. Scooting through, Lindsay writes, it's because we all feel that is the worst road in Cary. There you go, Lindsay. You are correct. Steve Goodridge, slower speeds on Chapel Hill Road will result in mapping apps avoiding it in favor of other routes with shorter travel times. All right, spoken like a true engineer. Thanks, Steve. You're absolutely right. And honestly, that's kind of what we're hoping a little bit, because it's such a safety and crash issue along that corridor. Nick, completely agree. Sandy, we're almost finished here. You guys are doing good. Sandy Campbell, at certain times of day, turning left from anywhere down Chapel Hill Road is difficult. Good perspective. Turning left means you're behind the wheel, I'm assuming, behind a car.
Yeah, there aren't a lot of left turn lanes
Yeah.
currently on Chapel Hill Road. If you're at the intersections, you've got some left turn lanes, and there's a new 3-lane stretch right there in front of Woody's and Maximilian's over there that NCDOT built, I think it was last year. But yeah, we don't have consistent turn lanes. So that's certainly something we're going to be looking at.
Right, absolutely. We need that to get people safely across, because it could be an aggressive, white knuckle driving if you have lots of people behind you too. Last comment here by George McDowell. We were told in the Cary School of Government in 2017 that the decision to increase Chapel Hill Road between the Maynards had already been made. Is this true? Actually, it's a good question.
It is true, actually. It's in, if you were to look at our long-term plan today, it's called Imagine Cary, you would see that Chapel Hill Road is slated for a 4-lane road. But really in the past couple of years, we've taken another look at it. Even though it's in our plan, we're, considering, is this the right thing to do? So that's why we're doing the study. We're trying to figure out, one, what residents want. One, we're looking at the context of the corridor. We're looking at the land uses. We're trying to reimagine what we want this road to be. And, I was telling Mike the other day, I don't know if we would be doing this study if we didn't have Maynard Road. Because Maynard Road is an alternative, right? I mean, certainly our study is looking at Chapel Hill Road inside the Maynard Road loop, but we're also looking at it, how does it fit into our larger transportation network? Because there are other east-west roads, and certainly Maynard Road comes to mind since it is NC 54. And if we didn't have NC 54, Maynard, I think it would be a 4-lane road. I'm not even sure we would question whether Chapel Hill Road would need to be 4 lanes. I think we would just do it. But the fact that we have that option, people are kind of taking a step back and saying, okay, let's take another look at this. Is that the right way to go? And that really is the crux of the study.
Right.
That's what we're trying to determine. And that's kind of what we need your help with.
So a natural response, Luana.
Was that too long? I
No,
can
no,
talk about Chapel Hill Road all day long.
No, a natural response to what you said. This is good. So this is parlayed nicely into the discussion of right-of-way and takings, and that's what people are in. There's like 3 or 4 comments that just came out of that discussion. What happens to the American Legion building if we 4-lane divide it? Honestly, there will be impacts. tremendous amount of additional impacts if the more lanes you put it out there. It's all relative to that. So, and we're going to get into the right of way. We're going to get into potential impacts, or at least the discussion of that in a second here. Yep. And Greg, right there. Would it be possible to hear some discussion about the difference between 4-lane and 2-lane? Your parlay nicely.
Good segue.
Yep, it's a nice segue coming up.
Yeah.
Stephanie Mood, I think I recognize that name. As a stakeholder, one of my key takeaways is that if Chapel Hill Road in the West Corridor is widened to 4 lanes, our pie of neighborhoods like Buckhurst, Northwoods, Buckhurst West, etc., will effectively cut off our area into an island surrounded by 4-lane roads. Harrison, Maynard, and of course Chapel Hill Road. Is this being considered? You are most likely correct, because today Maynard is already multi-lane. Harrison, I'm not quite sure how many lanes that's going to end up being, but isn't it 4 lanes right now, Luana, in that area?
Yes, it is 4 lanes.
So you got multi-lanes there. So, and that is our biggest question, Stephanie, right now is, do we want another multi-lane arterial going through here, or do we want something different? And I'm not trying to suggest anything, but that is why we're here today. Got to keep moving. All right, let's go.
Yeah,
All
can we
right.
go ahead and jump into that, the street width discussion? Yes.
Yeah, let's keep on doing. Okay, so let's talk about laneage. Let's talk about the cross section. And what I mean by cross section is not only the number of lanes, but its appearance, the multimodal amenities. And for each one of these, right, sidewalks and multi-use path, I should say multi-use path, side street path, we've got to make sure we're comparing apples to apples. So what I want to make sure, or we want to make sure, is that when we think about these 2 cross sections, the only difference between these 2 cross sections is the additional lane. It's 2-lane divided with left turn bays and pockets, medium pockets, or it's 4-lane divided with left turn bays and medium pockets there. Everything else pretty much stays the same. With plantings, we want trees, we want pedestrian level lighting, we want sidewalk on one side, and we want a side street path on the opposite side as well. That's a 10-foot, really it's a multimodal bike ped, folks with disability, wheelchair, micro mobility with scooters, whatever that constitutes, joggers. So everything else being equal, the only difference is the number of lanes, okay? With that in mind, when you compare the right-of-way, and that's the physical footprint that is needed to construct these 2 roads, the 2-lane divided with center turn lane requires about, on average, about 80 feet of right-of-way from edge to edge, compared to 105 feet, roughly, of right-of-way needed for the 4-lane divided, the 4-lane with the continual turn lane, okay? Anything else to add on this one, just to make sure people understand this is kind of what it would look like, kind of, sort of, and then the 2 differences. And really, it's just an additional, 24 or 25 feet of additional pavement to accommodate another lane.
Yeah, and certainly we may tweak the pedestrian facilities and the bike facilities in the next phase of the study, but really tonight we just want to talk about the travel lanes.
Perfect. So we also wanted to provide you kind of a consumer's report. Let's compare pros and cons for each of those, right? So this column here, let me describe what you're looking at. It's a little complex, but we try to make it in simplistic form, just like a consumer's report. 2-lane divided with a turn lane is here on the first column, or the second column, that is. And then the 4-lane divided is on the last column over here. What you're looking at is for each design feature or each characteristic that we're seeing on here, you have, like consumer reports, good or likely to improve, neutral, may not have an effect, or bad, not likely to improve anything, or worsen the case. So let's walk through each one of these. And you may agree with most of these, you may not agree with a few of those, but it's really our first attempt to kind of say, okay, let's compare what this looks like. That's it. So real quickly, lower speed and traffic calming. We give a thumbs up to the 2-lane and give a thumbs down to 4-lane because honestly, you build more lanes, most likely there's going to be more traffic that's going to go on it. And honestly, it's going to be very difficult as an engineer. It's going to be very difficult to control speeds on a multi-lane as compared to a 2-lane divided. Safety for all users. You know, the walkability, you know, smaller pedestrian crossing distance and bicycle pedestrian. They both have protection for bicycle pedestrian and all users, but think about being in a wheelchair. I'd rather cross a 2-lane than a 4-lane. That's all that we mean simply. We're not giving a thumbs down on 4-lane, but we're trying to equate that. Pedestrian permeability or crossing, that's important. Very similar. Crossing the street is critical. That's where people get hit. Congestion relief, short-term and long-term. It's kind of a wash a little bit, but congestion relief short-term, certainly, you know, you build it today, you're gonna increase the carrying capacity of that roadway for the 4-lane on there. Long-term, it may be a wash because it may, when you build it, they will come, and especially when you have another competing path. Less right-of-way required, absolutely. The 4-lane does a decent job of that. I think we actually qualified what that would look like. Roughly less than 2 acres of additional right-of-way would be needed for the 2-lane divided, and about 4 acres total would be required for the 4-lane divided. Most of that is from Academy Street to the west towards Maynard and the State Employees Credit Union Lowe's. Bus rapid transit, Luana did a good job about talking about, well, Luana, why don't you talk about this? I'm tired of talking.
Bus rapid transit. So currently there's a plan to bring bus rapid transit, which honestly, Juliet may be able to describe it better than I can, to Cary, which is an expedited bus service still in the travel lanes, but boardings, onboardings, offboardings are much more similar to maybe, you know, boarding a train. And it's much more, it's a higher level bus service with faster speeds. And so certainly we may see bus rapid transit on Chapel Hill Road as it leaves downtown Cary and heads west into Morrisville and RTP. It seems like a logical route. And so we're coordinating with the bus rapid transit study that's going on right now.
Awesome. And just to add to that, so what to us, right? What does that mean? It's less stops too for that BRT service. So with a 2-lane, so the question that the folks that are doing this BRT study, the 2-lane, there's 2 options to have the traffic or the transit bus in the flow of the travel lane that's there today, or do they have a separate dedicated path, a separate dedicated lane that is? And so there's the option there. So the 2-lane, when you look at it, it's kind of neutral. It's got to have, no matter what, it's got to be a shared lane with the transit bus mixing in with vehicular traffic along that corridor. There's no other option. Whereas the bus rapid transit 4-lane, it does have an option of having an exclusive lane, but that means that your throughput for vehicles is down to 2 lanes. So that's the difference. The 4-lane gives a little bit more flexibility because it provides the opportunity for exclusive lanes just for that BRT, but that's the trade-off.
We're going to dive deeper into that in the next phase when we start at the design workshop. So
Good point.
whether it will be a dedicated lane or a mixed use lane.
Awesome. So economic development opportunities, you know, they're both about the same, to be honest with you, because if we put that public investment, we have the amenities, streetscape, we expect return on that investment through redevelopment and infill. Environmental open space avoidance, in other words, avoiding environmental impacts, and obviously the less footprint you have, the more avoidance you create or you protect, and that speaks well to the 2-lane divided as opposed to 4-lane. That's the very simple answer. So with that, we're going to start our Q&A, and I'm going to jump in this because in the interest of time, I want to make sure people get this, and then we'll open it up to Q&A after. I think that's what Juliet would want as well. So with that, I'm going to start a polling. We have 3 simple questions. We'll stop and show you the instant polling, just like the symposium, and then open it up to questions. So I'm going to launch the polling. There you go. Tell me if someone confirm that they see the polling, please. Anyone?
I can see it.
Awesome. All right, our first question is, what are your highest priorities for the future of Chapel Hill Road? We want you to pick 3. This is a multiple choice. Pick 3. Is it A, sidewalks and bikeways, B, transit service, C, additional travel lanes, D, limited right-of-way and property impacts, E, safety improvements like lighting, access management, driveway consolidation, that sort of thing, F, streetscape, landscape, and signage, better signage. G, intersection redesign and crossings. H, economic development opportunities or redevelopment opportunities. Or I, something completely different. Please vote.
And do they have the option of typing in their other in the poll, or will it just be an other?
It'll be another. and then we'll ask them. We'll talk to them.
Okay, you can type your other into the chat then.
Good idea. This is good. Team, anybody on Team Jackie, let me know if we have a good response. How many folks do we have that are voting? I have no idea. I think we have 50 people on the line.
I'm not voting though, so. I want to vote, but
I know.
I won't.
We should. We live, work, and play here too.
That's
all
true.
right.
I drive Chapel Hill Road every day I go to work.
Awesome. All right. In the interest of time, let me know if you need any more time and we can do this, but I want to show this and open it up and start talking. I'm going to end the polling in a few seconds. 3, 2, 1, end the polling and share the results. Wow, there you go. Sidewalk bikeways, no big surprise there, 71%. Keep in mind, you get to pick 3 of these. Followed almost 56% safety improvements. I think that goes hand in hand. And then intersection redesign and crossings. That's great. That's great. It's very consistent with what we heard. We asked a similar question back in the symposium back in September. Here's another interesting. 32% said limited right-of-way or property impacts. Please avoid. And then streetscape. So all across the board, we did have one vote for other. Someone wants to put that in the chat box, and Luana, let me know what they read, but I'm going to stop sharing. I think this is great. No big surprises here. How about you, Luana?
Well, now 15% said additional travel lanes. Now I think we should, it's a balance, and then also 12% transit too. So we are trying to accommodate all
this is kind of
users on
deceiving.
the road, right?
Yeah, this is kind of deceiving though, because both of our scenarios include additional travel lanes. There's only 2 lanes out there, so we're suggesting widening it to 3 lanes basically, or 5 lanes. I'm with you, but
Yes. See, I don't call a turn lane a travel lane. Do you call a turn lane? I call it a turn lane.
it's a lane. Yeah, I'm with you. Okay, travel lanes. We probably should have qualified. That's good. All right, I'm going to stop talking. Stop sharing the results. Let's go on to the next question. And did we get anything in the chat box there?
I didn't see another response. So
great. All right, let's go on to question number 2. Again, we only have 3 of these. Should we encourage commuter traffic to use NC 54 Maynard Road? Yes, no, unsure, launch. Please vote. And you only vote once. This is a quick question here, so that's good. Quick question, but it's we got some variety of responses.
no, I would be interested to see how people respond.
All right, going once, going twice. I am going to end the polling, share the results. There you go. Predominantly 82% yes, no, and unsure. Yeah, and that kind of makes sense as well. I'm sure some folks want to protect the mobility and commuting of Chapel Hill Road. It seems a little bit more direct. And unsure, and that's okay. That's a great response. We're not unsure about that. All right, I'm going to stop sharing that and move on. Let's move on to our final question, and this is a big one, but we'll leave it up to you guys. Here we go. So how many lanes do you support for the Chapel Hill Road, assuming the level and quality of pedestrian and bicycle amenities are the same? That's the sidewalks, the lighting, the trees, and the side path there as well. A consistent 2-lane street with turn lane or median. B, consistent 4-lane street with turn lane or median. Or C, either is fine. Let me launch the polling. Please vote. Choose one. And again, no wrong answer in any of these. Wow, you guys were quick on the draw on this one. Fantastic. Going once, going twice. I am going to end the polling and share. Wow, okay, 83%. Keep it simple, 2-lane divided, 3-lane versus the 4-lane, and then either is fine, and that's good too.
Mhm.
Luana,
Really
you want to?
interesting to see some strong opinions there. So
Anything else you want to share on this before we close down the polling, Luana?
no, I mean, we're certainly going to take your feedback. And basically we're going to take your responses and go talk to our department directors and our manager's office, and certainly have more internal discussions, so that because we need to figure out the travel lane situation, right? And certainly that's a milestone we want to decide on before we go to the design workshop. But speaking of that, since I see you have the next steps slide up, is there anything else we need to
Well, we do have.
hit on before I start talking about next steps?
We have some comments in there, but that's okay. In the interest of time, in the interest of time, we were right at 6:30, and we promised to close the book on here and get you back to your dinner plans. But if there's anything critical in those chat, we will absorb that and we'll take that in consideration, and share that honestly with the decision makers, the management, elected officials, with the town, which is fantastic. I think the chat box is going to be very interesting conversation with those as well. So really good thoughts on here. I personally thank you, and on behalf of the Stantec team, thank you for your insight here. Luana?
No, yeah, absolutely. It's been very helpful. So just to kind of wrap up, so we can give you your evening back, right? In the fall, we're planning a multi-day design workshop. And just to kind of give you an idea of what it's going to be, over COVID, here's my analogy. I didn't tell Mike what my analogy was going to be. I watched a lot of HGTV. So a lot. And so do you know those shows on HGTV where they take a house, an existing house, an older house, and they update it and they renovate it? And so then they have someone come in and they show you all their design plans, right? And you get to pick which one you like. I love those shows. And that is essentially what we're going to be doing in the fall for Chapel Hill Road. Mike and his team and his designers are going to come in, and they're going to come up with different designs for us to give them feedback on. And so I'm actually pretty excited about that. But your feedback is critical for that too. Certainly we're going to need your input, because it's got to serve the community. It's got to serve your needs today. It's got to serve our needs in the future. And I just wanted to also say that I just let everyone know that we're going to be posting this video in a few days on the webpage, and that if you have any other feedback or if you have any other questions, feel free to email me. My email is on the webpage on the town, which is townofcary.org, CHR study. And certainly I'm always available to answer any questions. But I just wanted to thank you all from the project team for attending tonight and giving us your feedback. Certainly that we value your opinion, and thank you for your time.
Awesome. Have a great evening, folks.